Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are skipping book 6 of the Lindsay Davis Didius Falco series because I couldn't get it out of the library in time, so we're skipping to book 7, and then the next one that we do will be book 6 because it finally came in. So, deal with it being out of order. This one presumably picks up where the last one left off, but we're just gonna roll with things. It's a thing to note about this series is that it does seem to very much... It is extremely serialized. The books all are fairly standalone, but it's also very, very clear that each one of these is an episode in a series of in this series that has a very distinct and specific place temporally. In this case, the plot line... The book opens with Falco and his friend Petro sending that there's basically a crime boss that had been caught and is being exiled from Rome. Interestingly, this is based on the doubtless historically accurate, at least insofar as anybody knew at the time, fact that if you were a citizen of Rome and you were set to be executed, that there was sort of a legal loophole that would allow you to technically go into exile if you left within, like, a very specific limited time between sentencing and the next day when you were due to be executed. And so, obviously this crime boss is going to, amscray and avoid being executed because, who wouldn't? But he gets sent off, and we get the grim foreshadowing of Falco, talking about how, and if only we had known then what we know now, that poor Linus wouldn't, what happened to him wouldn't have actually happened. Yes, Linus, the guard member, the guy who, they're basically cops, and so he gets sent along undercover to sort of make sure that this crime boss goes where he's supposed to be going, and by the end of the book we found out that yes, he was made, and yes, he was murdered, and everybody is very sad about it because he seemed like a nice guy. Anyway, so basically the next day they find out that there has been a mass theft at, like, downtown warehouses where, like, a whole bunch of crap people had been importing was being kept, including a whole bunch of stuff that Falco and Helena, the lovely girlfriend, that they had on their last trip collected a whole bunch of crap for Falco's father, because even though he hates his dad because his dad abandoned the family and is now living with some redheaded chit and, is eminently wealthy, and while the rest of them are living in the slums, so he doesn't like his father, and his father is, like, the worst kind of auctioneer, money-grubbing cheat guy who is constantly taking advantage of people and all that kind of thing. His father is not the best human being that ever was. He's not, like, actively breaking the law. He's just, cheating people. Anyways, but he nonetheless still works with him, and it's one of those odd things where it's sort of like a combination of familial obligation and, like, some familial obligation and a certain amount of convenience and a certain amount of his father does have a lot of money to throw his weight around, and so Falco sort of goes with it. But he still resents his father and, periodically has to stomp off in high dudgeon when his father does another thing that is just dreadful. Anyways, so they there's this mass theft that is clearly a massively organized move by a massive organized group of people. And so Petronius and his fellow members of the whatchamadoodle police force, they set out to solving this, and Falco gets himself sort of, bullies his way in to see Emperor Vespasian because Falco, has his ins with the emperor, and this gets kicked all the way up that high, and attention is brought to it, and it is decided that there's going to be a mass investigation, which Falco gets himself seconded into, and then he gets pulled aside by Petro's boss, who then says, well, we're concerned about, corruption, so we need you to investigate everything. And so Falco is put in the incredibly uncomfortable position of secretly investigating corruption in his best friend's cohort. And at the same time, officially, he's supposed to be helping his best friend look into this stuff, but it's, of course, an official investigation, so he's there as an informer, and his friend is there as, a police investigator, in effect. And it's a complicated situation where he is inevitably going to tread on toes, and there is a point in this book where the whole mess really, really puts him and Petro at odds, and brings this to the point of genuine concern that it might shatter the friendship. It doesn't in the end, but it's clear that it goes right up to the edge on that happening. And it's an unfortunate side effect, and it's something that he protests to basically everybody who tries to bully him into it, where he keeps on saying, no, seriously, please, can you not put me in a position of losing this guy who has been my best friend for like 20 years. Please. Well, not 20 years. 10, 15. They served together in the army, and there's a thing he's just turned... So probably about 12. But, this is his best friend. He doesn't want that to fall apart. So you have this, and they investigate it, and the whole thing is really, it's really, really troublesome, because of course a bunch of murders start to happen, and we wind up with, the red herring that is effectively caused by information that you don't have. Because it isn't until, I think, slightly more than halfway through the book that we find out that is more than halfway through the book, yeah, that we find out that the crime boss that had been sent off on a boat at the start of this whole series of events never made it to his destination. We find out that the undercover officer that sent with him had been killed, and that it's clear that he's made his way back into Rome, and it suddenly upends the whole thing, because of course everybody thought that he was safely away in, some little town backwoods of absolutely nowhere, and unable to come back to Rome, and in fact he's been in Rome this whole time throwing his weight around, and it upends everything. I think also, equally interestingly, we get a sort of a character who in a way is a throwaway character, but it's one of those odd bits and pieces of things that have to do with, that in a way give this world all of this a certain amount of weight, and that is, you have this character and she is a madam at a brothel, and Falco recognizes her when they first meet, even though she doesn't recognize him. And we don't know who she is, and it isn't really until the end of the book that we find out that who she is somebody that he went to school with. Like, he got sent to a regular grade school, grammar school, when he was a child, and she was one of the other students there. And they'd had a contretemps where he had wound up accidentally biting her ear because they, had a tough scuffle together and so on. And the thing is, it adds this weight of, acquaintances that you meet years and years later, completely out of the blue. And it adds this lovely touch of world building to say, here's this character, this person that he meets, who she is significant in this book, but she has not been heavily significant in his life. She's not somebody who has been a recurring character. She's not somebody who has existed permanently in this world up until this point, but that she is a part of his world and his personal history, and it gives him a history and a background that extends back in time outside of his immediate personal familial interactions. Yes, having all of those sisters and his mother and his father and the memories surrounding them have, of course, always given him a background, but having this person that comes out of nowhere, like when you stumble across somebody that you haven't seen since grade school and you're just at a concert and there they are. And I feel like it's a lovely touch of not necessarily even world building or character building, but of reality building, of creating this sense that this is a real place where you can run into somebody who you haven't seen in literally 20 years, and they still exist. They have had a life outside of your own that has gone on its own path, and you interact again years later. And it's one of the touches in this book that really, really struck me, because it's an unexpected touch, and it's a touch that basically doesn't come in before this book and won't return after this book, but it's still there. And I love the weight that it gives. It's much the same as the weight that Falco's family gives him, in that, as Davis says in various forewords and afterwords and whatnots in this series, that unlike a lot of these, hard-boiled gumshoe 1930s investigator, she sauntered into my office and I knew she was trouble types, that Falco doesn't exist in a vacuum. He has a family and a lot of sisters and in-laws that he doesn't like, and nieces and nephews who are a plague on his existence, and and a girlfriend who also has a family that exists, and that he has, mixed interactions with. They don't all hate him and they don't all love him. Some of them like him and some of them like him a lot, and some of them dislike him and some of them dislike him intensely. And it's these bits of build out that I think really in some ways make this series more than anything else, because they give that weight of realism. Yes, the sense of humor is also delightful. I will not say otherwise. And the transportation to ancient Rome, where we are seeing ancient Rome as a place with real people as opposed to a place with alien people who think weirdly because we don't understand about their religion, is also, it's also very, very interesting. But I think these details are what really make this series shine in its way. So I'm running up on the end of my timer, so that's everything, and I will see you all next week.